Many high level players, when asked what the most important skill is to learn to improve as a player, it's side decking. Because of the way the game is designed, two-thirds of your games are going to be played with side decks in play. So, what exactly is a side deck? I remember playing through some of the old Yu Gi Oh! Video games made for the Game Boy Advance and wondering what exactly a side deck even was. And I didn't really begin to understand what it was until I started going to tournaments more consistently. And I started watching a lot more YouTubers talking about it and reading a lot more of the tournament policy. So, a side deck is a 15 card stack that goes off to the side and contains cards that can be swapped in for cards in your main or extra deck. Basically, the side deck exists as your contingency plans. You put everything in the main deck that you think will be good in most, if not all, matchups, and whatever is in your side deck are cards that are either situational, matchup dependent, whether you're going first or second dependent, and the things that you bring out are just cards that you may not need in any given scenario, either cards that aren't good in that matchup, cards that aren't good going first or second, depending on what you're going, or just consistency cards that you can afford not to play that aren't necessary to your main engine, just so you can fit more side deck cards in. One thing to keep in mind that I think I struggle with, especially when going to locals, is remembering to decide after each match. At the end of a match and before you start your next match, your main deck and extra deck should look exactly the same as it did when you started your first match. So everything that should be in your side deck or was in your side deck before you came to the tournament should be back in your side deck at the beginning of each game. Some easy examples of things that are important to have in the side deck are things like back row removal, things like Twin Twisters, Cosmic Cyclone, Harpy's Feather Duster. These are cards that aren't necessarily good against the more monster mash type of decks and really should only come in if you're extremely worried about certain floodgates, be it Mystic Mine, there can be only one, Goes in Match, Rivalry, all cards that are extremely prevalent in the meta from time to time, and cards that can more often than not just completely shut down your strategy. Other examples include cards that hit monster decks specifically, cards like Dark Ruler No More, Forbidden Droplet, and Kaijus. You can also consider other cards like Dimension Shifter and Artifact Lancia, cards that hit specific matchups, maybe not necessarily one particular matchup, but a subset of matchups. Lancia hits decks that banish a lot, and Dimension Shifter hits decks that want their cards in the graveyard and don't want them banished. So if you're playing a deck like Tier Limit, you want to bring the D shifters in from your side deck. But if you're playing a deck like Floowandereeze or Grand Maju, which doesn't care if their cards get banished and even want them banished, you can take the D shifters out. But in a matchup like Floowandereeze, you might want to bring the Lancias in so that they can't banish their cards. You also have to take into consideration cards that are only good going first or only good going second. Cards like Anti-Spell Fragrance or Appointer of the Red Lotus, freshly at 1. These are cards that specifically are only good going first because they're traps and they require being set first. Some decks can handle playing trap cards going second, but usually those are the types of decks that play a huge number of them, and your board, instead of consisting of monsters which you built over the course of a combo, consists of trap cards that you set from your hand and maybe drew into off of, different draw power. Examples of cards that are good going second are cards like Lightning Storm or Evenly Matched. Cards that, like Evenly Matched, require a battle phase, so can't even be used on your first turn, or cards like Lightning Storm, which require your opponent to have board presence in order to use them effectively. One thing that I think a lot of people don't really understand about side decks is that they shouldn't necessarily be a place where you house options or a place where you put cards that you cut from the main deck. If you have an engine card or a consistency card that you cut because you thought that you didn't have enough room or you wanted to get your deck down to a certain number, but you put it in your side deck on the off chance that you might want to put it in at some point, don't. Either commit to removing it and see how it goes, or put it back in and again see how it goes. Because wasting a slot in your side deck on cards like that puts you at a huge disadvantage because that card could have been a reactive card or a card that's good in a certain matchup that you need help with. You can include certain engine cards that are only good in certain matchups. A really good example is Dragon Pit Magician in Pendulums, a card that is very much so included more so as back row removal. If you think that it conflicts with your engine, but you want it there in case you end up in a matchup where you want more back row removal or searchable back row removal, then I can understand putting that in the side deck. Or if you have a card like Shaddoll Fusion, which is only good going second against decks that put up extra deck monsters, I can also understand including that. You want to plan on what you're taking out. Some really easy ones that you can take out are cards like draw cards or search cards, cards that improve your consistency but don't inhibit your ability to play the main engine, or cards that you included in the main deck for a specific matchup that aren't good in the matchup you're currently playing. A good example of that is including a card like Triple Tactics Talent and playing against a deck that doesn't use a lot of monster effects, a deck like Altergeist or even Mystic Mind Burn. Those decks don't really use monster effects, especially not on your turn. So including a card like Triple Tack really isn't a good idea. So that's a really good card to side out in those specific matchups. Remember that side decking is extremely important. And again, ostensibly 2/3 of your games are going to be spent with side decks in mind. So you should put a lot of thought into it and make sure that you have answers for certain matchups that you think are going to come up. It might make or break your tournament result. So I hope you found this video helpful. Was there anything that I might have left out that you think needs to be brought up? Go ahead and put your favorite side deck card down in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one.